As more on our top story, Singapore's government has unveiled what it plans to do following feedback received through the Forward Singapore exercise. For more analysis on this, we're joined by Associate Professor Eugene Tan from the SMU School of Law. Thanks for coming in.
No, thank you for having me.
Report is 16 months in the making, and we hear in this last 16 months a great deal about the social compact. Has the report made clear why we need to refresh as well as strengthen this social compact?
In a way, Sue, the external environment has become a lot more challenging, and domestically, it has also become more demanding, right? An aging population, limits to growth with regards to land, labour, and carbon as well. And we also have concerns with social inequality and social mobility. So I think it's imperative, that society as a whole takes stock of how far we've travelled, where we may not have done as well, and how we can do much better. But it's really fundamentally, when you look at social compact, it's really about bringing things together, right? So if you look at the origin of the word, it's about bringing social compact, bring people closer together. And it's really fundamentally about protecting, the middle class, right? It's also trying to ensure, that the middle class continues to have that optimism in the future. It is also about ensuring, that the broad middle ground, which need not correlate with class, but the broad middle ground, will also enable, for society to move ahead with unity of purpose, right? Because we see in many other societies, the broad middle ground becoming fragmented. So it becomes very important, to ensure that as the environment becomes a lot more challenging, as society becomes more diverse and complex, we will have this set of shared values, that will enable us, to reach our shared purpose in good shape, right? Because I think in the past we may have focused a lot on shared purpose, right? Doing well in a variety of indicators. But I think the question now is, how do we get there? And so in that sense, the journey matters as much as getting to the destination.
Prof Tan, Singapore does face diverse challenges, certainly. But these ideas as well come at a time when cost of living has risen in various ways. I mean, not just for food costs. It depends what you buy, obviously, but also for energy, transportation, so on. All of these things are significant. Is there an appetite for buy-in among the population for this right now?
It's an excellent point, right? I think, cost of living concerns are top of the mind. And I think here we are looking at, an attempt to, in a way, adopt a bifocal approach, right? So we need to focus on present concerns. And I think the government would take the view, that we have the assurance package, we have many other different schemes to help Singapore, with cost of living concerns during the current time. But it's also important, that we cannot be so myopic and just focus on the short term, right? There is the need to look ahead. And I see Forward Singapore as one attempt, that we should not have to play catch up. We should try to plan ahead, and ensure, that these concerns, we will be prepared, we will be able to deal with them, put in place the necessary resources, get society behind, some of the key measures that will be put in place. And in that sense, we will be able to deal with current concerns, as well as look ahead, with optimism.
So not just immediately, but longer term plus a whole of society approach. How do we get there?
That's, to me, the big challenge, right? Putting the report, rolling out the recommendations, I think, or rolling out recommendations to the people, I think that's the easy bit. Trying to galvanize society, and by that, getting everyone behind, the 7 key shifts, that the Forward Singapore exercise seeks to put forth. I think that would be the challenge, right? Because we are looking at not just legislating changes to the law. We are not talking about policy changes. We are fundamentally looking at mindset shifts. How do we change our view about what it means to be successful? How do we change our view about what does it mean to lead a purposeful life? What does it mean, to care, for someone, who is not as privileged as we are? These are mindset shifts, right? And so this is where, the government can be the promoter, right? The government can be the catalyst, right? But ultimately, it is really people who will put in place, who will get these measures to really work. And here, this is where I think businesses play a big part. Civil society has also been mentioned, young people, but it's really this whole of society. So it's not enough for there to be the whole of government, right? There needs to be the whole of society, because these are not simple measures, that can be implemented just by putting more money, making the necessary policy changes or changing the law.
Well, you certainly can't pay people to have empathy, but you can encourage them to have an empathetic sort of viewpoint. Not all the details from this policy recommendations have been made public to us just yet. Do you think that when we get a fuller picture of it, that we will see government changing details to do with social expenditure?
I think social expenditure will definitely rise. And I think it's a point that, Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong acknowledged as much, in one of the stories in this bulletin. Social expenditures now take up about 18% of the gross domestic product, and the government estimates that it will go up to 20%. So that means that, we will have to find the necessary fiscal resources to enable the different measures, the recommendations to be put in place. So that would mean, how do we find more fiscal resources, without taxing people or companies, in a way that works against people and companies. So that'll be a challenge. But I think there is also in the report, the mention that, we can do more with less. So I think there will be also the focus on making sure that, we make every dollar that we spend on all these different measures, that they will reap, the benefits. So it would mean, not just spending more, but also spending wisely and making sure, that the expenses are necessary and that they do achieve, the targets. And so that means, having a very robust system of audit, to ensure that, we are getting the bang for our buck.
All right, you mentioned Mr. Wong there, pardon me. He mentioned the next milestone is budget next year, when these plans will actually become policy. Now, this Forward Singapore is an SG-led project. DPM Wong has said it's not top-down. It is very much based on a shared consensus. Is this a suggestion or a reflection of a change in the style of governance?
I think it's a shift, right? I don't see it as a dramatic change. I think if you look at successive prime ministers, they have all spoken about the need for being more consultative. And I think as society evolves, the mode of consultation will have to change. And so if we talk about these issues that affect society as a whole, then I think it is important, to have that ground-up initiative, that ground-up energy, that ground-up buy-in as well. But the role of government will always remain critical, right? To set the direction, to find the resources, to be a promoter, to be a catalyst. So I think that, you mentioned about the budget, and I think that's where, we will have to find those resources, to put, the recommendations, into practice, to implement them. And how we find those resources, will be important, right? Because we also need to think about, we can't dip into the reserves, and so it will be necessary, to be able to find adequate resources for all that we want to do.
The Deputy Prime Minister mentioned that the next key milestone might be the budget, but there is also the general election that must be held before 2025, sometime before 2025. Prof Tan, how will Forward SG factor, do you think, into an upcoming general election? Does it mean that it might be sooner than we think?
Well, Dawn, I don't think elections are imminent, right? So we certainly know that, the government wants to have Budget 2024, to put in place many of these recommendations, into practice. But I would say that, the Forward SG report, will be in the public narrative, in the months ahead. It is a fair comment, I think, to say that the Forward SG report may even look like an election manifesto, because it tries to take stock of, what we have done all these years, but also what needs to be done, right? So there is an agenda of action there. So I would say that, the Forward SG, will be something that the governing party will put forth to voters and ask them, for the endorsement, of those plans. Never mind if some of them are already put in place, such as Healthier SG, and more will be put in place, with Budget 2024. But I think it's an attempt, to get people behind these important shifts in our society.
Professor Tan, always a pleasure to speak to you and have you in the studio and to get your insights. Associate Professor Eugene Tan there from SMU.